Hey everybody, welcome back to the North Carolina Real Estate Show. I'm Tiffany Weber. I'm attorney at Thomas and Weber in Mooresville, North Carolina. I am joined by my husband Ryan Weber today.
Well, hello.
Thanks for coming back with us. You're kind of integral to this whole operation.
It's very uh it's a lot. Like
You
I'm
got four devices, four that can probably be seen on camera that you're running, two cameras, three lights,
there's a lot more than 3. I'm glad you only
four.
see 3, 5, 6.
Oh, yeah, I guess I forget about the practical lighting. Yeah. So yeah, you're doing a lot here, and I greatly appreciate it. But welcome back.
Hello.
So,
I don't have anything. I'm trying to make sure that we're running good.
okay, you're balancing all of the
Yeah.
equipment.
Once we get going, then
Okay.
I'll get into it. I like to make sure we're good though.
So today we are talking about meets and bounds. And meets and bounds is it's a way to describe real property so that you know what you're actually buying. And that's referred to as the legal description. So the legal description, not the address, not the tax parcel ID, not the lot number. The lot number could be part of it, but we'll get to that. Uh, those things are not what identifies what you're buying on the contract. It's the legal description of the property, which is located on the, do you know?
Deed.
Deed, yes, it's on the deed. So there are two different ways that you can find a legal description on the deed, which one is meets and bounds, which we'll talk about today, and then the other is by reference to a plat that's recorded in the public registry. So a plat would be like, okay, you own this big part of land, parcel of land, and then you divide it into a lot of different lots. There would be in that plat meets and bounds descriptions of or identifiers, basically a survey drawn that would show you how to apportion off the lots from that big parcel that gets recorded in the public registry. And then you can say, I'm buying lot 2 of the Mallard Head subdivision as recorded in book 1, page 2 of the Iredell County Registry. So that's a plat reference legal description. Now, a meets and bounds legal description is quite a bit different. Do you remember? We did
I
it. You don't remember?
I remember 0 about this. The only thing I know is that this is the legal description in which a property is. So it's what you're actually buying the meets and bounds. You're not buying like for example, this building 514 Williamson Road. You're not buying 514 Williamson Road. You're buying the meets and
The
bounds
legal
in
description.
which this building entails.
That's a good way to think about
It's
it.
the only thing I remember. Like this is not anything that I like I why would I don't think anybody other than people in real estate need to know it. Like a normal person, I don't feel like needs
Well, I
to know
think
this.
the general thing that, like, a buyer or seller would need to know is that it's not the address that decides what you're buying or selling, it's the legal description. The other reason why it might be important to know what meets and bounds are is that so those are determined first, let's just talk about what it is. So, meets and bounds, those are 2 different things that go together to create the legal description. Meet, M-E-T-E, meets are like the measurement of the line.
Like
So,
meters.
like, uh, I'm gonna, like, try to draw out.
Oh boy, we're zoomed
So
in
you're zoomed in?
enough.
So, like,
It's just a little bright on your paper though,
okay,
but you're
well,
good.
I'm trying to draw here. So I'm just keeping it simple with a rectangle. So the meets would be like the measurement between 2 terminal points. So, like, the line. So in, the way we do it here is this would be like north 0 degrees, 2 minutes, 32 seconds, west 100 feet to a terminal point. So the terminal point is usually a physical thing on the ground.
I was gonna
So
say, isn't it like a stake in the ground?
yeah, like an iron pin, a tree could be
What
one.
if the tree falls?
Well, that's why there's iron pins now. Um, in
What if the
case that
pin gets pulled?
that is illegal.
Hmm.
Yeah. So don't do that,
I,
people.
I feel like I've pulled a pin before on
There's n-
accident. I think I put it back. I was like, "What's this? Why is this in our yard?" And then I was like, "Oh, that's not good. I'll put that back."
I hope that's not true. So the meat, it would be like this part right here. So like the straight line or whatever the line or the curve it could be between 2 terminal points. Now the bounds are the terminal points here. So like an iron pin and say, a big old rock. I mean, that could be, it
Boulder.
used to be that all you would have is you go from the tree, north 100 feet to the rock, west, so on and so forth. But the bounds are the points, or the physical landmarks so that you can identify what's going on between the points.
Mm.
So meets, and then the point would be like the bound. And that could also be like on Lake Norman, you could be bound by the shore of Lake Norman. There's all kinds of
But what
ways.
about the rising tide?
No.
Okay.
I'm
Just a
just I'm
question.
just gonna just leave it at no.
Okay.
So what you're buying here is like what's contained within this. Now, the reason why this matters to people beyond just real estate agents is, okay, let's say, you've got a legal description that's like beginning at the Old Stone and Harris's Corner, thence north one, blah, 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 blah. We map that. So whenever we get that in our office, we have a software that we insert or input all of that data, and it draws a map. And sometimes if there's an error in the legal description, or really error in a legal description, or like it was poorly constructed meets and bounds, it might look like this.
That's not how it's
That's
supposed to look.
that's not how it's supposed to look. So what you're buying is what can actually be enclosed. If you contracted to buy this, but the survey or the meets and bounds legal description maps out like this, we got a problem because that's what you're going to end up with,
Mm.
not this. So that's why attorneys, one, always encourage surveys, to be absolutely clear on what exactly you're buying, but also it may be required in order for you to be able to be conveyed what you contracted to buy. So that's kind of like I don't know what to my soapbox about meets and bounds. Um, Really, the main things that I want people to know is that that's what controls what you're buying is the legal description. Um, Plat references, I'd say it's probably about at this point 60-40 plat references versus meets and bounds. Um, the more it gets developed and more neighborhoods get put in, those are almost always exclusively plat references. But yeah, meets and bounds are still incredibly common. It's not just some like old English thing.
I was gonna say, would you consider that like the old school way of doing it?
Yeah, yes, especially like pre-development.
Mm.
There was no common scheme of development when people came to the US. And this was also used in England and other places. But yeah, like you think about all of these areas, goodness, if you're a Yellowstone fan, that's all meets and bounds.
Mm.
It's probably not a plat of the Dutton Ranch. So that's definitely a meets and bounds legal description, just because there hasn't been any sort of development scheme there.
Not until the airport comes.
Well, I don't think it's coming. Don't
um,
if there's I don't know if there's any new episodes out. Don't
I don't know.
We watched the last little bit in haste, so I'm not really sure. I
Yeah.
don't really remember.
So with meets and bounds, why how how does this pertain to real estate agents? How can this be
Mhm.
helpful for them?
Well, one, to help set expectations with the clients that, okay, you don't want to spend money on a survey. I get it. You're already spending money on the house and the inspections and blah 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 blah. But when the attorney tells you that, hey, I know you think you're buying this, but it looks like this. If you understand what this means, then you can be much more helpful in helping, conveying to your client why that matters and why a survey is so important. Um, you know, there are times where like we don't have to North Carolina doesn't require a survey, but there will be times where, like, in order for us to fulfill the obligations under the contract, there has to be a survey because the seller said they were selling one thing, but the legal description doesn't say that. So that could mean a couple things. We might have to go back and get corrective deeds from prior transactions. Survey is definitely going to be necessary, but an agent understanding this and why it matters, is really critical to a transaction where a title issue comes up because of a failure of a meets and bounds legal description.
What happens if like somebody what happens if it's incorrect? Like can it be incorrect? Like there's mistakes that happen. Like what
Mhm.
happens if like in 1987 it was bought and the improper meets and bounds were recorded, and now the person selling it, and like everyone around them knows that it's like this piece of land, but it was improper, so it was like this little tiny piece of land. What
Yeah.
and how?
Well, there's a couple that could go a few different ways, because just because everybody's okay with it now doesn't mean they always will be. So you can't rely on your neighbors being cool with it because neighbors change. You can't assume that you're always going to be neighbors with the person that was fine with that. So for title to be correct and clear, then the only way to make sure that happens is to either one, get a quiet title action for where a judge says, yeah, we understand that wasn't done correctly, but it's been long enough. We've got all the proof that you actually own, and that was the intent of the parties. We're just going to settle this once and for all. This is your legal description, but that involves court intervention. Or you could get a corrective deed from the prior seller, um, just to convey the property correctly so that it does map the way that it's supposed to. You could also do nothing and take a chance that hopefully nothing will happen. But if you're going to sell, you agree in the North Carolina standard offer to purchase to provide clear title. So you may be called upon to go back and essentially try to rewind time to get it corrected.
Mm. Now, when you're using this, is can the legal description or the meets and bounds be different than like the house address, I guess? So like, you
Mm.
know, someone thinks that they're buying this, but like it's actually like a little bit off or over.
Mhm.
Like what does that look like?
So that can happen, and in fact, this makes me think about a couple years ago, we had a guy call us. He'd bought a property in the mountains. The closing had already happened at this point, in the mountains, and he said, "Hey, I've got this big issue. I went under contract to buy this particular property. Um, I closed on it. I went to go clear the lot, and this guy comes out there and says, um, "What are you doing on my why are you clearing my lot?" And he's like, "It's not your lot. I bought it a couple weeks ago." And he's like, no, you didn't. This is mine." And he's like, "Well, the guy that's upset that his lot's being cleared, is like, what did you buy?" And he tells him, and the guy's like, "Yeah, that's down the street." So they take a ride down the street, and this guy pulls up to this lot that he's like, "I can't build on this. Like, this is an unbuildable lot." Um, and that's partially because he didn't get a survey. He
Mm,
didn't get a survey of the property, so everyone in the whole transaction was mistaken. There's maybe an argument that the seller knew, but there was no evidence.
yeah.
So seller, listing agent, buyer's agent, buyer, and then the attorney has no way to know without a survey. But that like he thought he bought 123 Main Street, and he was relying on that's 123 Main Street. We all think that's 123 Main Street, but it's actually not that at all. So that's kind of like the consequences of it, and that's why we say surveys are so critical. Um, there's an argument to be made that like, oh, maybe there should have been some red flags in that transaction to not let it get that far. But truly, without a survey, it's hard to know for sure because you can't rely on GIS to show you the accurate boundaries.
It gets
Um,
close, but
it's
it's
close,
yeah.
yeah, but it's not always accurate. I'd say now it's way more accurate than it ever was, but there's so many properties that haven't changed hands in a long time that they could still be inaccurate
Mm,
looking back. So you can't just look at the view on the GIS system and say, "Oh, well, yeah, there's my property line. I'm good."
yeah. What like you guys do a lot with legal descriptions
Mhm.
up in the office, and people are, we're always working on legal descriptions. What are the things that you guys are doing like from a real estate attorney perspective with meets and bounds and legal descriptions?
Well, one, we're comparing it to part of the title search is comparing it to the prior conveyances to make sure it's accurate. And then mapping the meets and bounds to see, okay, here's the shape we get. Does this look like, does it look like the aerial view from GIS? Do we see any immediate, like, all right, it doesn't map, it doesn't close, or it's way smaller than they contracted to buy 11 acres, this is 4 acres. There's something wrong here. Um, Aside from that, we're also, when we have to get someone to get a survey or they choose to get a new survey, we're drafting legal descriptions based on the survey. So looking at the image and writing that in words. It's like a reverse word problem of,
Mm,
okay, now we have to take this and translate it into words to put on the deed to make it mean something legally.
gotcha. Um, no questions today, I don't think. So it's funny because like this is a very important topic,
Mhm.
but it's
It's
not
very
as
dry.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
not as sexy.
Yeah.
You don't have like cool, crazy things that you can talk about. So, you know, I think from a real estate agent perspective, you kind of like need to know what it means
Yeah.
and what the overall idea of it is to kind of smartly explain something to
Mhm.
a client, but you don't need to know like the intricacies and details exactly
Yeah,
how it
you don't need to
operates.
know how to write a legal description. You don't even really need to know it doesn't hurt to know how to read it, but the reading it doesn't really do a whole lot until you map it. So,
Mm,
if you can't map it, then you just need to know why it matters.
yeah.
Now, Christopher had asked about Plat books and are they real? Have I seen one? There are real Plat books. I don't know if they still have them in books. I know they did. But like whenever you go register a plat, there's like this big Mylar that you take to the county and they approve it and sign off on it, and then you take it to the register of deeds and they record it. I imagine they keep it. I don't know. I don't know what they do now with everything electronic, but they were real books. Like you flip the page, here's this plat.
Hmm.
So
Before your time.
yeah, before my time. He had some other questions too. I wonder if I answered them. I'm gonna check. Have you ever come across a particularly unusual legal description of a property? If so, what made it stand out? Um, yes, when there are like really strange landmarks, like say it's an old, um, super old legal description and they're having to come up with like any landmark possible. You know,
Old
the
Jimmy
horse trough or,
Bob's. Old
yeah,
Jim Bob's old voodoo doll down on the corner of the property. That's the edge.
that's the edge right there. You better not move that voodoo doll. Or, like you'll read legal descriptions where you're like, "Oh, I know that person," or, "You're gonna be so and so's neighbor." Um, but really the most unusual ones are the really old ones where they're having to rely on, like, boulders and, the old pine tree and
There will be 3 boulders next to each other. Go to the nearest one.
yeah.
Walk 7 paces to the left, and that is the corner of your lot.
Yeah, that's kinda how it was, except, they didn't use paces. Well, I don't know, maybe they have
So it's like
before.
an old pirate map is really what it is. It's like you're on
Yeah.
a treasure hunt.
Yeah. It is a little bit like that. Like that, like a pirate map. Um, oh, yeah, and he reminded us about the 87 properties in Las Vegas that got conveyed because of the wrong legal description.
Mm,
Like if that happened in North Carolina and like this news story, the person was buying one lot, so they wanted to buy lot 10. The legal description said, being all of lots 1 through 87 of so and so subdivision. That happened in North Carolina, it got recorded, then the person would be vested in all of lots 1 through 87, provided the seller still owned all of those 87 lots to give. But if they did, then they just gave all 87 lots to the buyer. So obviously a corrective deed would have to be done there to to fix that. Um, and yeah, you better hope the buyer's not gonna give the seller a run for their money of getting that fixed.
mm. It's very
It's important.
interesting. Some wild stuff out there in the real estate world. Not exciting,
Not exciting.
but can be wild.
Yeah, it can cause a lot of problems, that's for sure.
Um, Christopher just commented, I was reading that some of those legal descriptions are in trouble because magnetic something, need my glasses. Magnetic north drifts over time.
Oh, that's n I just learned something new.
Well, I was wondering that too. Like, what happens if like an earthquake happens and things move? Like the boulder's gone now
Mhm.
because there was an earthquake.
Need a new survey. Now, then you run into the issue of conflicting meets
That's
and
what I
bounds legal
yeah.
descriptions. So, All right, let's say, let me go back to my notebook here. I'm gonna be looking back at this in a couple weeks and be like, what was I doing? Um, so say you've got a neighbor. Um, Here's you. You've got your meets and bounds legal description. It maps. It's the right acreage, what have you. And then your neighbor, you'd think that the properties would just butt up to each other. But what if your neighbor's legal description conflicts with yours and they overlap? What do you do then? Well, that can happen. That's could be due to prior deeds having issues, a survey error, um, clerical error in typing the legal description or not verifying. But to fix this,
Fight to the death. Who takes it over?
you could do a boundary line agreement, in which the parties, each neighbor says, "Okay, I know what my lot is supposed to be. You know what yours is supposed to be, and to resolve this error, we're just going to agree that all right, this is our line." So an agreement would be drawn up and signed by both parties and recorded in the register of deeds, saying, regardless of what the deeds say, we are agreeing now this is the dividing line between our properties. That's one way to do it. That's the probably least expensive way to do it. The other thing is go to court. So quiet title action to figure out who's right, which of these legal descriptions is correct, um, and then it's settled after that. After the declaratory judgment is entered.
I'd rather it be a battle.
Uh,
Battle royale.
I don't think that's I don't think that's allowed there,
But
that
it's
guy.
on their own property, they can do whatever they want.
That's not how that works either. Do you think that if you're on your own property, you can commit crimes?
It's my property. No HOA. Can do whatever I want. There's no restrictions.
We have an HOA now, so aside from the fact that that's just not right.
Just no restrictions.
Nope,
Lawless.
no more Weber
Can there
Island.
be can there be like an island? Can you have like uh you've got your square there and then you actually buy your square minus the island in the middle. Maybe that's someone else. Can there be properties like that?
Yes, but those are troublesome because the island, as you describe it, would be landlocked. So you'd have to have access to
You have to have an
pub
easement.
you'd have to have an easement.
Me. I want to
Let's
develop
send this guy to law
I want to
school.
develop a land with an island
I don't want you to do that, but hey, dare to dream.
because it's going to be lawless. There's going to be no restrictions.
That's not going to that. Okay, and I just
There'll
wanna
be
make sure
there'll be restrictions on the square, but in the island, that's kind of a free for all.
everyone understands that everything you're saying is totally not correct.
Not
None
yet.
of this is legal advice regardless of who's saying it, but Ryan, is not an attorney, is not saying anything
Man, I would be
legal.
a way more fun attorney though.
Yeah, you would. I'll give you that. I'm not even gonna argue.
Yeah, like the Funkle attorney. You go like, "Oh, I wanna go see Ryan because, it's
Who
not
know
gonna be right, but
who
you're gonna
knows what
have
I
a
was gonna
ball."
say. You're the wrong answers only attorney. That's what you would be.
They're like, I
It's
want
opposite day.
these meets and bounds," and be like, "Great, we're gonna put no HOA on this one, you can do whatever you want." They're like, "Cool, sign me up. I want this piece of land over here, so great, we're gonna make our new meets and bounds overlap it, and then you guys can battle it out, and whoever wins that battle, it's
You would
yours
be
now."
like
It's
chaotic evil.
what's the game? It's like Catan.
I've never played that.
Yeah, it's like Settlers of Catan. Just like, yeah, I'm gonna start taking a little bit more here.
Yeah, yeah. So maybe we don't send you to law school after all.
I'm gonna do it. I'm not gonna do it.
Yeah. Well, I think that's it. We've meets and bounded it to death.
We should not have any more meetings about this.
I know there's a reason. You're like, we've never done that topic, and now you understand why.
I'm
We've
bound
done like
to
short videos, but
bound and determined to never do it again. Dun-dun-dun.
on
I
that
have
note,
on this somewhere. I think. Oh, you can't hear it. You'll hear it in the
you'll hear it in
podcast.
the podcast. I hope
Yeah.
that wasn't anything bad.
I
Sorry,
don't know what
podcast
that one
people.
did. Might have been grasshoppers.
Well, that's it. I don't have anything else. I don't think we have any other questions.
Like, comment,
Not a super.
subscribe,
Yeah, like,
share,
comment, subscribe,
swipe
share.
up.
Oh, that's what Ben used to do. Swipe up.
Yeah.
Be like, it's
We
this.
convinced them that swipe up was like the same thing as subscribing on YouTube.
Poor guy. Yeah, so it's not the most exciting topic, but it is important, especially if you're an agent in North Carolina, to be able to help your clients understand. Of course, come to the attorneys for legal advice, but
Come to
um,
Ryan for fun.
come to Ryan for fun. But this is just to help you be the trusted guide to your client. The more you know, the better you can do that. So hopefully you learned a little something today, even if it was a dry topic. But we will catch you next week on another episode of the North Carolina Real Estate Show. See y'all later.
Bye, peeps.